Okay, I'll just start a recording since there's not as many people here. Maybe they want to rewatch it, but I think attachments is a decent subject. Um, where to start with attachment? So, I think one of the first places that I would start with attachment, of course, is the principle of balance, and that's not what we see in the world. So typically, what we see in the world is the desire to exist in one extreme or the other. Typically one extreme is viewed as worse and one extreme is viewed as better, and then um, it's just a dynamic, and it's something that we're all probably pretty familiar with.
I think that scorekeeping is something, I don't know if it's individual or it's common, but I think that in my area of attachments, I keep score where I don't in other areas at all. I find
Keep
myself
score. What does that
keeping
mean?
score. Um, if I'm attached to things or people chosen, I do gain a lot from that. But I find myself measuring the level of energy and input that I contribute, and whether or not it's matched to a degree that I find adequate. I measure in attachments where I don't, where I'm not, where I'm less attached.
Hmm. That's getting a little foggy for me. I'm not sure what we're talking about there, but
I do the housework. You don't do enough housework. Don't put the towel on the bed. I don't like the towel on the bed. Like
mhm,
things like that don't happen in my other relationships. The more
mhm.
attached I am, the more I feel the where it is, where's the separation and where's the overlap, and balancing that becomes, that's where I get stuck.
I see what you mean.
I live alone.
So I would use a different term though. I would separate attachment from the other thing that you're mentioning. I think what you're noticing though is that what you're mentioning in terms of keeping score is more consistent with the people that you're attached to, and there would be a reason for that. But I don't know if they're the same, it's the same thing that's occurring, because you can have you can have one without the other and the other without the one. So um, you typically are keeping score with people who you're more attached to, but you could keep score with anybody if you wanted to. So that means that it's not necessarily, synonymous with attachment itself. You could also have an attachment and not keep score. So it's two different things that are occurring, although there's probably a reason that they're occurring in tandem, and I could kind of explain that. So the first principle is the principle of balance. So we're not looking to have no attachments. Uh, the most common way of thinking about attachment is to detach from self, thereby allowing you to detach from everything else. And so now we have the two ends of the spectrum, detached and attached. And now we're just swimming in a binary soup again. So if we can understand where attachment comes from, what it is, that can also help you understand probably where the keeping score factor is coming from as well. But the result of an imbalance leads to suffering. So the result of an imbalance is suffering, whether you're on the attachment side or whether you're on the detachment side. At some point, it will, show itself in your life experience as undesirable, something undesirable, and then, suffering will ensue. So the reason that attachment has occurred is because either psychologically or physically, sometimes it is just psychologically, but it can be physically too. It depends. If you spent a long time with the person, maybe you were forced to be in close quarters with somebody, like family members. I was forced to be in close quarters with my brothers. I didn't want to be around them guys. I'm like, but we live in the same house, so we had to be. Now, the imbalance comes from the attention, and attention being focused on the object of attachment, whether that's a psychological focus or a physical focus. So a physical focus would be like looking at TV. So you're physically looking at the TV, and then you're psychologically engaging the TV, and then you don't feel bored because it's stimulating in one way or another, or it's just a habit and it's filling the habit void, which is why sometimes people have a TV on and they're not watching it, and they're not cognizant of it. It's just occurring because they feel more comfortable with the TV on. That's because of an attachment has occurred, because of existing in an imbalance. The interesting thing, though, about people especially is that the imbalance can happen very quickly. So maybe it's somebody that you're attracted to or somebody that you're really interested in, and they start paying attention to you. Now, all of the sudden, the degree of cognition going towards that scenario, which again is very likely removed from the present moment because they're probably not in the room all the time with you. They're probably not talking all the time with you. These would be the things in addition to the time that we're with them, we're thinking about them and considering them when they're not there. And the degree to which we do that will be directly proportional to the degree in which we create the attachment. There are some other things that other baggage that can swing us to an extreme quicker. There's all kinds of psychological reasons why we would attach more quickly to this rather than this. And that has to do with the totality of your life experience so far. So we accumulate the attachment, and then the attachment is most seen, most felt when the object of attachment is removed. And then that's how we know that we're attached to something, because when it's removed, we feel unwell. Does that make sense? So the keeping score, typically we start to keep score and we start to be comparative with people that we get comfortable around. And the more comfortable we get with somebody, the less the mind is trying to impress them, the less the mind is trying to convince them that we're friend worthy. So usually relationships have that phase where you like ice skating? Me too. Let's talk about ice skating and all the things that we connect in, and oh my God, this is a great person because they like all the things I like. And so that's kind of that infatuation phase of any relationship, if it has that type of infatuation period. Not all relationships do, but then again, those relationships probably won't have a lot of attachment either. So the infatuation type of thing comes up again because of the totality of the individual's experience. What people are infatuated with will be different, although similar to some extent. We can see similarities throughout our television and the things that we find entertaining, body types and things like this. This is what is most commonly being viewed as desirable. So there is a commonality, and that's where the term, like, something being beautiful or someone being attractive, it's a fundamentally a biological mechanism. We've talked about this. There's no reason to find a butt attractive, but yeah. So because I said butt twice, there's no reason to find a butt attractive. But so we're spending a lot of time with a person, and the beginning of a relationship, especially if it's somebody that we like, somebody that we enjoy, we want their favor. And in certain minds, there will be plenty of subtle attempts to manipulate that favor. And they may not even know it. It could fall well below the level of active awareness. They don't know that these subtle attempts are occurring. Maybe you don't really like ice skating that much, but I do. And you're like, I just love ice skating. It's the best thing. And that's not really true. So you're extending yourself a little bit to meet the other person where they're at because you think, I'm not saying you've done this or anything, I'm just giving some examples of relationship dynamics. And then when people get comfortable, that's typically when what you're talking about with the comparing and the contrasting and the competitiveness, and what's the word that you used? It wasn't competitiveness, it was
Scorekeeping.
Yes. So typically that would start to occur the more comfortable you are around a person. And now it's no longer, I need to gain your affection because I know I already have it. Now go do something else, or stop annoying me, or stop doing this, that, or the other thing. Yeah. And that's typically a lot of self-importance involved, a lot of focusing on I, a lot of focusing on self, which leads to the focusing of other, which is all different forms of attachment. because normally when we look at attachment, we look at attachment to a person, attachment to an object. We get attached to concepts, we get attached to ideas, we get attached to beliefs, and that's all from existing in an extreme, either physically or most often psychologically existing in an extreme. Does that make sense? I guess that's
It makes
an
perfect
explanation of where it
sense,
comes
except
from.
the answer isn't what I wanted.
Well, that wasn't even an answer. That's basically
No,
just
but
where it's all
what it
coming
is,
from.
the dynamic, I understand, and it's really not necessarily what I wanted to hear, even though I follow it and I believe that it's accurate. Um, the scorekeeping, eh, I guess there's ego involved there, but
There is.
it's also a balanced dynamic. For me, I think I just don't want to cohabitate with anybody. I just want them to go home. Because I feel like I'm very committed to my balance. And it's certainly, and I like people, and I find myself joining things. I'm going to certain classes and interacting. I interact more than the shyer people in the class or the people who don't choose to interact. I just do. And I enjoy that, and I can find balance in that. But once I start creating attachments to people, which I do, I mean, I have friends for life, and then maintaining my balance becomes more of a challenge because I'm attached. And because I'm attached, and if the only answer really is to be less attached in order to move forward with my balance, it's not really what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear how I could do both, and
Well,
I can't. I
well,
really
you can.
can't.
Well, you can to a certain extent because this is,
Exactly.
and this is where for me the voice of power will come in very handy, because typically what you're dealing with attachment is emotion. And in one way, so basically what you're saying is that you want to maintain balance with an imbalance is what you're saying. So we have an imbalance that is causing an attachment, but we still want to maintain our balance despite having that. In the hydrostasy phase or layer of this practice, that is possible because you start to become more emotionally intelligent. So you're more aware of your own emotions as they're occurring, and then certain things become, I accept this. So my dog, I have a very strong level of attachment, and I know that when I'm removed from that attachment, it will cause suffering. And the voice of power reminds me of these dynamics. And with understanding of the dynamics comes understanding of the choice. So here's an interesting thing about the behavioral change that we were talking about. Let's say that you habitually twirl your hair. The moment you put your attention on twirling your hair as a habit, you are now choosing to twirl your hair because it's come into your volition. You are now recognizing that it's occurring. It's no longer a habit. So you are now choosing to twirl the hair. It still may have the momentum of habit, but you're still choosing to do that. Now, it would be very similar with certain relationship dynamics. We're all different people, we're all really unique. We put ourselves in different situations and different circumstances for a wide variety of reasons. Someone who loves to live alone, they introduce somebody into their domicile. And it's like, okay, so just know using your voice of power, especially when emotion starts to occur, you chose this. You put yourself here. This was your desire, and this is now something that you have to navigate in real time as it's occurring. And the more emotionally intelligent you are, and by emotionally intelligent, I mean, you're aware, cognitive attention training. I'm aware of the emotion that's occurring right now, and I'm going to watch the psychological component so that it doesn't go even further into suffering. But when my dog transitions to something new, I'm going to feel terrible. When I feel terrible, I will remind myself why I feel terrible. I understand the dynamics of feeling terrible, and I'll be very careful to watch my mind to make sure that terrible doesn't go to something much worse, because terrible's changing. Given a little bit of time, the great revealer will start to smoothen, that out a little bit, and I know that. So reminding myself is the logic that helps to cut through the emotional response, which is one of the important aspects of the voice of power. So as a creative, free will human being, you can continue to put yourself in these situations and navigate them in the moment. What you may be somewhat tempted to do is navigate it outside of the current moment, trying to plan, trying to predict, trying to prevent, trying to do all of these different things outside of the moment itself. But there's a lot of learning involved in these types of situations when you see what is irritating you, and then you're like, well, wait a second, this is just an unnecessary focus on myself. It's not that big of a deal. I don't need to let this ruin my whole day. That would be redirection in the moment, not some abstract, way of looking at it or planning or anything like that. So in this practice, because especially in the hydrostasy layer of change, and I mentioned that because that's probably where you're more navigating in this practice, you can navigate based on how you feel. When things start to feel way out of alignment, the attachment's getting too strong, because of your practice, because of your emotional intelligence, you'll be more aware of that. And you'll have tools to talk it back to center. Does that make sense? Maybe even spending too much time with somebody, maybe thinking about somebody too much. There had been many times where I'll look at my moment and I'll see where my thought is going. And I'm like, wait a second, this is actually where a lot of my social anxiety mantras came from. I'm not going to give my attention to somebody outside of the moment, and then also to somebody outside of the moment who doesn't even really want it, because I was giving my cognition away, giving my power away to a psychological thing that I was creating, right? So that's a little bit different, but it's still an attachment issue. I'm attached to this, I'm attached to that, and it's creating the social anxieties. Does that make sense? So the way that
It does. I can recognize when I'm doing that. It's
Mhm.
it's probably because I am operating differently with my attention and my attention to my own balance, that it is affecting relationships in my life. I have lifelong friends and their children, and um I I become less, it's exhausting. I to be to be when I'm with people who I the energy is in such an extreme, and I guess I'm recognizing that been I've I've taken on the role of, come to me with your problems person. And I don't know, it's always been, people feel better telling me what's bothering them because I don't know, I'm the voice of reason according to some of them. So, but I am less tolerant of being around the energy of people existing in an extreme, that everything is important and everything is an emergency and everything needs to be a problem to be solved. And I guess I'm just recognizing how often others spend in that dynamic. And since I don't find it tolerable to do for myself anymore, I find I want to spend less time with people who are doing that, because being in their company, I'm either completely attached. If I'm engaged, it's exhausting because I don't want to exist there in that dynamic. And so the answer really is I have to be less attached in those, in my attachment, because it's draining to me. It's just as draining to me because it is draining to me because I stop practicing then. I get sucked up
Mhm.
in, you know what I
I know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. Yeah.
and I guess it's, if I continue to practice, then I'm less attached.
If you continue to practice in the moment, you'll learn ways to navigate those situations. But what we're also kind of brushing up upon, and then I'll answer Jerry's question real quick so we don't get too far away. We start to talk about this word authenticity. Authenticity is a super important subject, like last week or like on Sunday when we talked about the lens of perception. All of our thoughts, all of our behaviors, all of our desires are going through this lens. Your lens is changing. You've changed deliberately your own lens of perception. And so maybe something that you used to tolerate and do before because of the lens of perception being different, maybe not as present, not as mindful, not as deliberately intending the point of your attention. So more attachments, more chaos, more below the level of recognition, behavior, and thinking, and all of that could have occurred to a certain extent. So, but now your lens of perception has fundamentally changed. It is more clear for you. It is more desirable for you. You are choosing things that you want. So now your desires and your actions and your thoughts are going through a lens of perception that is more balanced, more chosen, more preferable. And now you may be starting to see some of the characteristics of your authentic who you are. And we're always arriving as the totality of who we are, but because of habits, because of conditioning, because of a wide variety of other psychological things, we go outside of our own comfort zones, our own, balance, I guess I would say, not comfort zone, but our own balance.
Way outside.
Way outside. And so, for example, myself, I don't really enjoy a lot of the things that people enjoy anymore. I just don't. Shayna, may I have another cup of coffee? I do still enjoy coffee. I sent her a direct message, but I don't think she sees those anymore. I don't know. So, I've noticed, and it's all a learning opportunity because we pay attention to learn, we pay attention to grow. I can put myself in any social situation and get along. I have deliberate folly, but I don't want to spend my whole day deliberately follying. So I save that for when I really need to. Somebody comes into town, they really want to see me. I'm like, we'll see what happens. I don't even know. I don't even know where I'm going to be in 5 hours from now. How
I
am I going
just
to make plans?
just can't help but notice, and I guess, I was okay with it when I left. There's a lot of changes in my life, and they include my attachments. People that I worked with for years, like 15 years, and know well and know their children and have exchanged information about the intimacy of our hearts and our lives and
Mhm.
things like that. When I said, you know what, I am gonna move, you know, and really, I'm the person that they come to with all their things, and oh, they tell me, I listened to your words, I got so frustrated, but I listened to your words about staying present and and all of this. And then when I had the opportunity, like when my life opportunities lined up and I decided to retire, move, and it didn't land well with people who I was very close to. Didn't land well at all. I was abandoning them, or I was doing something. I wasn't going to be the person who was there doing whatever I do. I don't know. I upset their balance, I guess. And I haven't heard from them. Like
Yeah.
amazing to me. And
That's not your business. That's not your
Well,
yeah,
business.
I wouldn't
Yeah, I mean,
say it,
really.
I do get that, Jerry. It's not her business, but it does affect her. These are her friends, these are her family members, these are people that she has been around. So that's
Oh,
in
yeah, yeah.
her
Yeah,
sphere.
I get that, but that's
Yeah.
part of what
and I can
you guys are talking
certainly,
about.
Right.
I get it, Jerry. I can absolutely see that most of it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, exactly. You just
I
said it right there.
I really
And
get
that's
that, and I'm
typical.
not
I get
even
it.
angry at them or upset with them. There are, people who are close to me in my life who are more angry at them than I am. They're angry on my behalf, that people didn't, support me and congratulate me, and that they would be upset with me, angered them, like, wow, I can't believe they did that to you. And I don't feel that way. I don't feel that sense of
You
I
were a
don't
tool. You
I
were a
don't
tool they were using, you know?
I don't feel
I mean,
angry. I
yeah.
recognize where it's coming from. It was surprising to me.
Well,
It's
Donna, just look at it from, so you're learning to balance and navigate and keep attachments within a scope.
and
The
do all
the
the things that I've always spoken to them when
Right.
they were suffering, you know?
Right. But then also, the voice of power can remind you to consider the fact that the vast majority of people that are not doing this. They're not doing it at all. They're indulging their attachments. They're engaged in the social destroyer. They're engaged with these other forms of destroyers. It's their primary influence when the mind isn't it's the nemesis. Feed the nemesis and you feed all of the destroyers. You feed all of your habits. You feed all of these attachments that are and that's occurring for pretty much everybody. So when we say common mind, that's not definitely not derogatory. It's a statistical phrase. Statistically, what we're doing with our attention is far more rare than it is regular. And what will that fundamentally mean? So a lot of people go from one type of thinking to another type of thinking that this new thinking puts them in this strange and removed category of different thing. No, you're still thinking all the time. So is everybody else. You're in the same category. We are fundamentally moving ourselves into a different category of existence because we're no longer navigating habitually, repetitively, and in ways that don't inspire us.
But it
So,
does put me in a
and
strange
it
and
does put you in a
odd,
strange and odd place. And
yeah, it
and
does.
I'm prepared to have these conversations because I've been in these, and there's no one answer for each person. Well, no, there is. There's a consistency in principle. In principle, I pay attention to learn, and I pay attention to remember what I've learned. So there was a time where somebody will say, "Oh, Ernest, you have answers, and I need to talk to you. Let's have coffee." And I'm like, okay, I'll meet you on Thursday at 2 p.m. Let's do it. And then Thursday at 2 p.m. comes along and I'm like, I don't want to fucking meet you. I don't want to have coffee. I'm doing something else with my life right now. I don't really want to do that. So I would put myself in situations that I didn't really want to be in. Flash forward 10 years, and now when somebody says, Ernest, I really want to see you on Thursday at 2 p.m., and I'll say, okay, we'll see what happens. We'll see as we get closer to Thursday whether I'm going to be available. I don't want to commit because, it's not something I want to ultimately commit to. I'm just being honest. Sometimes people take that honesty as, wow, Ernest is a dick. Some people take that honesty as, he is a good communicator and I appreciate the communication and not, I will definitely meet you. And that's why I got that phrase, the back out king. I'm not the back out king anymore because I don't agree to things that I don't really want to do, or I don't know that I'm going to want to do at, a month from now or 2 months from now. So this is about Ernest, though. I'm not telling you to do this, but the principle is pay attention to learn, pay attention to grow, pay attention to see when we're making things about ourselves. And then as Jerry was pointing out to a certain extent, pay attention to when somebody is projecting. They're projecting their own life experience on you, their expectations on you, what you should be doing, what other people should be doing because
I
it's
get
most
that. It
common.
was very clear. That was very clear, that part of it. It's just that I recognize, can't help but notice that in the beginning of this practice, everything you said was making sense. And I could see the thread of connection between the brushes that I've had with these experiences and um, the value, the desire in embodying the practice. And as I practiced, it felt better and better to do so, and it felt more elegant and fluid and authentic to do so. So I continue to do it. But what I feared intellectually when I first started was I don't want to become that person who really doesn't like being around people all that much. I really like people and I still do. I still do. But I really I don't get enmeshed with people much anymore. And it serves me well, I guess, but it's not common. And I have become that person who, people can't figure, they look at me and they can't figure it out. That's always been the case, but it's even more so now,
Sure.
where they want to think that I'm aloof and different, but appear to be very happy, and it's not congruent in their brain. I should be living under a bridge or something, because people who are content with their own experience and just brushing social interactions with people, but not having, moving and quitting your job and not having a husband and all of that, it's really they don't know what category to put me in. And I recognize I've become that person that I was afraid that if I become that, then who will I be? and that's who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah, it's just a surprise. It's a surprise.
I don't know why. Like I mean, when you look at let's get into Jerry's questions real quick, and then I'll talk about I don't know why, because it shouldn't be a surprise. It should just be 1 + 1 = 2. There's common. What you're doing is uncommon. That will equal you as being uncommon. Bottom line. But Jerry, yes. What was your question, if you can remember?
I'll see if I can get my thoughts. I've just been listening this whole time. I want to share a thought, and some of it's directed at Donna because of the topic she got into, which is it's all of us. I mean, we're all vibrational beings living in a human existence, and there's no perfection. We're practicing, we're navigating a principle-based life. And so, we gotta, let's lighten up here. And there's that beautiful thing called choice. So we all get to choose how much, well, maybe not if you're working or, yeah, see, anyway, let me get off that a little bit because, Donna's retired, I'm retired. So, yes, I get to pick and choose how much interaction I, partake in. But anyway, I just wanted to make a comment towards Donna's direction. Not that you need to get into it, not that I'm trying to examine you, but I personally thought it was interesting because I think we all agree, not speaking for you, but we all agree in this group, thinking is the culprit, thinking, our pain, our anxiety, our stress, there's a thought process going along in there somewhere. That's the whole point of redirect, the practice, so on and so forth. So I just wanted to share that I thought it was really interesting listening to you, Donna, as you were describing, and I can completely relate to all of it, how you were just saying, yeah, I like to get out and I join groups and I've got these close girlfriends and my family, and you were talking about attachments. And in the course of that, as a single independent woman, clearly making her own choices, what I then heard you say was, I just don't know if I want to cohabitate. And none of those things you mentioned have anything to do with cohabitation. So that was interesting to me that you interjected that, in that, I think most of us do want to be involved. Not that we have to, because I certainly hope you're not doing that to yourself, because I think we all know. I mean, I'm not trying to speak for you, but I mean, I'm just saying I was single for a long time myself, and it was by choice. I mean, I'm not going to apologize because this is what I'm doing. It's by choice. So I just wanted to share that, again, not speaking for you, but it was interesting to me that you interjected that in the middle of other things. So maybe it is something you're thinking.
It's a continuum for me. When I make the example of my family and how much time I spend with them, or my coworkers and how much time I spent with them, which is really more than my family because I'm with them every day for 8-10 hours a day, or my friends that I've been lifelong friends with, and how much time I spend with them. Cohabitation to me is just an attachment that you make, and then you spend a lot more time with another human being who has their own sense of balance. And so those are different
And
degrees
sometimes
of,
they're living in your house.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't
mean, is
even
that what
have,
you mean?
as
Yeah.
much as I love animals, which I don't even know if I can communicate how much I enjoy being with animals. I don't own any right now. There are none in my household, only because I really am navigating embodiment, and I'm so committed to it. that I am not interested in having any, making any attachments that will hold me down from moving through life at my rhythm and my pace until I choose, until there's space for it. And right now there isn't. And I have a responsibility to the attachments that I make, and I don't want to make them. Just like Ernest gave an example of just even making an appointment for a cup of coffee. I'm not interested in committing to that because I am more committed to moving through my life at my rhythm and my pace and my balance. And you might not factor in on Thursday at 2 o'clock. So I don't make those commitments anymore. And if that makes me odd or weird, or it doesn't matter, that's my balance, and that's how I choose to navigate my existence. So the reason cohabitation got thrown in there wasn't because I'm feeling some social pressure to be paired and cohabitate. Because I don't. It is the expectation, though, once you get involved with someone, they're like, all right, usually it's the woman, I guess, but where's this going? And it's not going anywhere. Like, but I like you just fine. Like, what? I don't know. I don't want to cohabitate with anyone.
You're
Friends,
too cute. You're
I
too
just
cute. You know what you're doing.
I just don't want to. And it's making
Well, and
some
who
of
said
my
you have to?
it's making some of my relationships challenging because I am the one changing the dynamic. So, when you have a mobile and everybody stays balanced in this mobile and you're the one who moves your piece, everybody else kind of shifts, and their response to that is not always pleasant.
It is not. And so one thing that I like to do well is bring things back to principle. So the individual examples will be different for us all, somewhat similar though. Maybe Ida loves dancing. She just loves to dance. She used to dance, in a variety of different ways, but now practicing, she still dances, but that has changed because she has, the lens of perception has changed. So everything that's going through that is different. Now, the principle here is the lens of perception for the vast majority of human beings on Earth is feeding the nemesis. We know what that is, right? Feeding the nemesis. It's a phrase that I have made up to organize information, but ultimately the nemesis is below the level of recognition. The mind and attention being below the level of present, mindful, aware recognition of what's occurring in the moment as it happens. Driving is the perfect example of when somebody can slip well below active recognition and still perform the duty of driving the car. People are doing that with their everyday life experience, their entertainment, their conversation, so we'll just look at one obvious thing and then I'll just continue to talk about how this looks in principle, because we have to look at the nuts and bolts of it, and then how it ends up for each one of us could be very different. How we navigate it could be very different. For some, it could feel more challenging for others. So, for example, I don't need to talk. I don't, now I will, and I'll share an idea every now and then. Shayna and we discuss things, but if I'm walking down the sidewalk with somebody, I don't feel the need to compulsively speak. And people do compulsively speak because they compulsively think. And therefore, when they walk down the sidewalk, they have to talk about some shit. It's usually other people, it's usually things that are well outside of the present moment, imaginary scenarios, different situations that occurred in the past, who's sleeping with who. I'm going to judge this person's behavior. They're cool, they're not cool, they're fine, they're not fine. It's all the shit that people talk about because it's all the shit that people think about. And when they get around other people, they feel compelled to fill in the gaps with constant nonstop chatter. I don't like that. I don't need that. I don't require that. I don't want that. And I even told Shayna when we were driving the other day that I do feel a sense of nervousness because I understand the human brain. So if you are in a traffic situation where 4 lanes are meeting and you have 6 people trying to cross the street, and you have an ambulance in the background, I don't want you talking to me. I want you to navigate the motor vehicle with deliberate attention and awareness so that I don't die in the car. Does that make sense? But other people, it's just they want to talk, they want to fill in the gaps, they want to be basically under the level of recognition. I'm incongruent to that fundamentally, and I'll only deliberate folly so much. I will a little bit, to a certain extent. I'll entertain a few conversations. It's fine. It doesn't offend me. It's not like I don't want to talk, but I don't feel compelled to fill every single space of our time together with constant nonstop chatter. And that's because of the lens of perception is fundamentally being influenced by the nemesis and the destroyers. Look at the destroyers and why I've come up with them. Why have I organized them this way? What do people talk about? Their biology. They're not going to sit there and say, oh, this is my biology. They talk about biological factors, sex, food, and then entertainment is a separate destroyer because the mind it can't be still. It can't connect as easily as our minds can through practice because we've practiced. Fundamentally, it can. All minds can outside of abnormal psychology, of course, because then I don't know what's possible because there's something abnormal occurring. In a way, we're creating abnormal psychology to a certain extent because it's not common. We're creating something that is less common, therefore it would fall under the abnormal category. But when I say abnormal psychology, I mean there's something physically wrong potentially with the brain and the way that it's assembling its environment. So what do we do with all this? What are the principles behind this so that we're not just talking too much about the branches of the tree? What is the root? What is the trunk of this tree? Well, my mind is no longer being held, it's still influenced because I live in this weird world and I have to navigate. Remember, what we're doing is surfing. When you're surfing and you feel balanced, it's not as if you're not doing anything. It's not as if you're just sliding along in space, not doing, you're doing micro adjustments to stay balanced, but you still feel balanced because you're making those micro adjustments. That's the hydrostasy bubble. We're making our micro adjustments. We're never stuck in balance because that's stuck. That's not moving, and that's not ever accurate. So we're always moving. We're always making these little micro adjustments. That's why I will no longer use the term flow by itself, because then we forget all about ebb. And there is always this little, up and down type of curvature, and we get it spinning, which I think is really cool, but that's a webinar for a different day. So we're inside the hydrostasy bubble. We're adapting, which is like micro adjustments. And then we can feel when we lose our balance because we're like, holy shit, and I gotta get my balance back. Of course, if we fall off our surfboard, now that's washing out, bottoming out. Now we got to get back up and try again. So ultimately what we're doing is we're maintaining this balance, which is the world. The world is weird and it's offering all of these challenges and we have to adapt to them. So we are being acted on by an outside force in a manner of speaking. So we can't just surf in space. We're surfing on water where we have to micro adjust. And for the most part, because of the practice, because of the presence, the mindfulness, the deliberate intention, being aware of the forces that guide human beings, such as the entertainment destroyer. Entertainment isn't a destroyer for me anymore. I maintain my points of attention while pursuing any entertainment purpose. Anything with entertainment value, I am also doing my points of attention, and I don't need it necessarily. I do things because I can. I watch the Matrix movie because I can. I watch the Lord of the Rings TV show because I can, and I stay inside that bubble. Outside of the bubble is watching way too much TV. On the other side of the bubble is completely rejecting motion picture, right? So I've gotten on two different sides. I'm in the middle. I can enjoy film and I can enjoy stories, but I can stay balanced and I don't have to go too far in either extreme. And that means that I'm not as attached, which means that when it's removed from my experience, I'm not going to lose my shit. So if my TV went out, I'm going to find something else to do. And though space junk is just falling from the sky everywhere, I can just go outside and do my thing and find entertainment value in existence. I look out windows for entertainment. because I'm so easily entertained with the world around me. I just don't need much. That is an anomaly compared to the rest of the world that needs this, that, or the other thing for entertainment in general. I'm being general because there's always going to be an individual who hates TV, who doesn't need it. Okay, so the entertainment destroyer is not suffocating me anymore. The biological destroyer isn't suffocating me anymore. Somebody gives me attention, I'm like, that's cool, but I'm not going to let myself go outside of my circle and be like, oh my God, attention, what do I do? Besides fall below the level of awareness so I can go back into all of my habits and start cherry picking. Not anymore. I don't do, does that mean, for example, at the clinic yesterday, I accidentally poured myself hot water, which requires pressing 2 buttons rather than 1. And it's because I made us tea right before our Tai Chi session, because in Tai Chi, I include tea as a part of it's a tea ceremony. We just drink tea and talk about how you feel, and then we go into the Tai Chi. And incidentally, it gets the chi moving because that's what green tea does. A little bit of trickery involved, but they don't know that. So we are, well, I was making my example of, so I accidentally did the hot water, and Bob is like, a momentary lapse in your mindfulness practice. And I'm like, no, not at all. Absolutely not a momentary lapse. We are habitual creatures. We create habit. The mind wants to do that. But I saw it as it occurred. Did he? And he's like, oh, I noticed that. I hadn't finished pouring the water before I was well aware that it was hot water going into my cup rather than cold, because I'm cognitively aware of the present moment, but it doesn't mean I'm perfect. It doesn't mean, or, in air quotes, perfect, or I'll never pour hot water instead of cold. I'll never skip my foot across the ground because
You're
my
just not
attention
that
is not over
far
here.
from the bubble on that side.
I'm just not that far from the bubble. I'm still in the bubble. I'm still doing my thing, and I'm still aware of everything that's going on. So my practice is still in place. But there's this erroneous sometimes assumption that because you're doing this practice, you're better than other people. And that's the shade that I get from people is, oh, Ernest is a goody goody. He pretends to be perfect. He thinks he has all the answers. If you ask me a question, I'm gonna give you an answer. If you don't ask me a question, I ain't gonna say shit to you. Like, I'm not gonna give you anything that you didn't ask for, especially in scenarios where people are getting very emotional. It's like, I'm here if you have a question. Otherwise, I'm gonna stay back here because I don't want nothing to do with this. I'm not gonna get caught in the crossfire. So
Right.
the biological destroyer, it's not suffocating me anymore. I don't look at body parts. I don't feel overwhelmed when I see. My mantra for a little while is there are 7 billion people on earth. If half of them or even 25% of them are attractive, that's like 2.5 billion people. It's not that rare. It's not that special. It's not anything you did necessarily. So why am I flipping my shit because a person is attractive? That makes no sense. The reason would be is because biology. I find it attractive, the juices start flowing, the energy starts moving, and all of a sudden I'm engaging in an elaborate human mating ritual, which is the vast majority of people's life experience, is an elaborate human mating ritual. And it's very uninspiring at the end of the day for me personally. But so we have, what are some of the other destroyers though? We have the habits that we've created already. I can see those as those are occurring. The common mind is just further establishing those. They're driving them in. And then you'll get this phrase in the world, oh, I just can't help it. It's just me. I'm an asshole. What can I do? I was born this way. I remember the moment that I told myself, I can't help. I was in the break room at the movie theater and I was telling somebody, I just can't help it. Instantly, inner guru was like, what the are you talking about? Of course you can help it. You just don't. You don't choose to. You don't show up. You're not present enough to do anything different other than the patterns that you've trained yourself to constantly, project or create those habits and ingrain them and make them even deeper and worse. So the habits that we've created already, the biological destroyer, the entertainment destroyer, what's the other one? Which one am I missing? I don't know. It'll come to me later. Especially because I'm writing a book about it. I got to get that shit straight. But the bottom line, so here's the principle. The principle is they were a destroyer before and they suffocated us. They are no longer suffocating. They're still a destroyer because it still has momentum in society. That's the 5th destroyer, is the momentum of the human species so far, which goes back to thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It's in our DNA. And I do influence that by being aware of my own mind and changing the pattern, so to speak. But ultimately, what we're doing is something different than what most people are doing with their mind and their experience, and that will put us on an island of judgment. The interesting thing about the judgment, though, is it's going through their lens of perception, it's going through their destroyers, and it is a derivative of their views. It's a derivative of their lens, of their mirror, and now they're projecting that onto you based on their understanding. So Kobe in Germany, he's a pretty reserved kid. You know, he's not a kid, he's 22. He's a pretty reserved, you know, young person.
Yeah.
And he's not very out there with his energy, you know, unless he gets a few drinks in him, then he starts dancing and acting a fool, which is normal. But he got judged. You know, somebody that he was staying with are like, oh, are all Americans like you? And, you know, not outgoing and not bubbly and not energetic. And my son is just like, well, fuck you. Like, we're all different. And the kid said that his chakras were closed. And my son is like, and they can be closed if I want them to. That was his response to me. He's like, they're my chakras. They can be closed if that's my desire. And I'm like, right on. They're your chakras. Do what you want with them. Close them, open them, whatever the hell you want to. They're yours. So, but where was that judgment coming from? From that person. It was coming from their own experience, their own understanding, their own totality of experience. Now, in principle, though, what I do look for is consistencies versus anomalies. So if 15 people call me the back out king, that probably means that some of my behavior is affecting other people in a way that I don't feel good about. And that's, again, my choice. So intention 100% matters. And if I know that my actions are affecting people, I'm not going to say that's not my problem. I'm not going to say that's not my responsibility. I'm going to say, I know that what I'm doing is causing a person, and many people, because we're looking for consistencies. If it's just one person, that's an anomaly. But if 15 people out of 15 people say that Ernest is the back out king, then I'm probably doing something that affects other people. And I'm going to take a look at that because I'm not above reproach. I'm not above habit. I'm not a perfect individual. And maybe this is something that I could navigate a little bit more elegant, such as not committing to things that I don't want to necessarily commit to. And if I'm not sure, I just say I'm not sure. And if I really want to, then I commit. I have those 3 phases. I don't want to, maybe, and heck yeah, let's do it. I'm not always heck yeah, let's do it. And if I am, it's probably something that I really enjoy. Like, let's go to the lake. Heck yeah, I'm into that. That type of thing. So in principle, I'm not above reproach, and I'm not going to take that, you know, the speak your truth, and if the other person can't handle it, it's not your problem. Bullshit. Your intention, you knew that Jerry was going to flip shit when you brought up that subject. That is your intention. That is your responsibility. And you did that output. Now, Jerry's response to that is her garden. And I can't tend to that garden, but I knew that what I was saying was going to antagonize or was going to be misperceived or was going to be misjudged.
Yeah.
And I knew that. So now I have to take care of my intentions and make sure that I'm not doing that as much. So one thing that I've learned through all of this is that, you know, men especially have the tendency of not taking especially women, their long-term feelings and emotions into consideration. They
Really?
they want something now, and they'll do everything they can to get to the desire that they want without thinking of how these repercussions are going to but I simply can't do that anymore. I can't, because it's hustling. I'm too present. I'm too mindful for that type of activity. So now, in the past, I would start conversations with other women. I would start conversations with other people, and I would get this type of feedback that I enjoyed, you know, getting the attention. We love attention. It's a powerful thing, and we want it from other people to a certain, and we can get attached to that. We can get attached to the attention from other people. And that's an aspect of our spider's web that isn't completely inspiring to us, and it will start to change and reshape itself over time as we start to create our deliberate spider's web in the spider's web example. So in principle, we are fundamentally going away from what's common. In principle, that will put us at odds with the rest of the world to a certain extent, and deliberate folly will only take you so far before people start to notice that you're just not doing the things that everybody else is doing. But once you start to catch this elongated ebb and flow, the less that's going to matter. You know, as long as your intentions are pure, and as long as you're not, you know, leaving things to where people don't know what you're doing and you're unpredictable, then, you know, I think it's more easy to navigate. So pay attention to learn, pay attention to remember what we've learned, and this is the way, even with our own habits, even with our own destroyers, because we're still being influenced by them. We're still creating new habits from the 4 destroyers. So it's not like we ever defeat the nemesis completely. We never defeat the destroyers. We could defeat the destroyers completely, but that will take a collective effort of humanity. Change the 5th destroyer, all the other destroyers start to change because we're not feeding the nemesis. Bottom line. Does that all make sense?
Right. When you say it would take a community to dissolve all the destroyers, you're saying, and the other example you gave about if you know something's going to upset somebody else. So in other words, when someone asks you for coffee on Thursday at 2:00, there is a social construct that exists, and the social construct that exists is, if you make an appointment, you stick to it, because otherwise it's disrespectful to the other person.
True.
Now, even though it's not your intention to be disrespectful, you just have something else you'd rather be doing, that is, you're breaking a social construct. So part of being aware is being aware that there is a social construct, and that if you
Yes.
say yes, then that's going to be the response, because your awareness informs you of that. So it doesn't mean you have to change and show up, although you could say this could just be deliberate folly, and I'm going to do it because my intention wasn't to upset someone, and I wasn't as attentive to the social construct as I should have been at the time that I made the commitment. So I'm going to uphold the commitment just for the sake of not upsetting somebody else, because that wasn't my intention, and my absence of attention shouldn't make another person suffer. So I can find a way, just like I can find a way to go to work and make this day pleasant, I can find a way to go to this social engagement and make it pleasant.
Right.
Or I can choose not to make these appointments, ever be firm with them, so that I can continue to operate the way I prefer at my own, wherever I am on Thursday at 2:00, I can decide whether I want to be at coffee with you or not. So I will not make the commitment, so that I'm not breaking any social construct. And then if the judgment of me is odd, then I can live with that, because that's not my problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
But in order to obliterate the social construct, you would need a whole society to agree that appointments
Yeah.
don't mean anything to do with
Exactly.
you as a person.
Exactly. And this is working with the statistical definition of common and uncommon. So, you know, I was talking to somebody at the dispensary, and they kept asking me to hang out. And I'm like, well, I know myself very well. I'm hyper aware of my own personality, my memories, my likes, my dislikes, what I prefer, what I don't prefer. And I'm going to be honest with you. I do want to hang out, and I don't know when this is ever going to happen. I don't know if it's going to be next week. I don't know if it's going to be the week after, because I know myself. I know that when the time comes, I'm going to make the decision based on how I feel in that moment. So let's tentatively put something on the books for next week around Thursday, but I'll let you know by Wednesday if I'm feeling it or not, to give you enough heads up. And then they can either accept that dynamic or not. They could be like, no, Ernest, that's too weird. I don't want to do that. That's okay, fine. Like that, but that, I know myself. So I'm just telling you a little bit about that so that we can work together, you know. But what would be inappropriate is yeah, let's meet at 3 on Thursday. And then come Thursday, I'm like, I can't make it because space junk is falling from the sky, and now I'm making shit up, and now and none of that is in principle. And it made that person mad, and I'm like, that's your problem. No, no, my intention was not balanced. It was not pure. It was a part of the dysfunction. And that's something in the world today where you just see on Facebook, I'm going to speak my truth. I'm going to say what I want to say. And basically that means they're giving themselves permission to be an asshole and to be unkind to people. And they're gaslighting them and saying that it's your fault for taking offense. No, you know that I care about you. And you know that when people that you care about say these types of things, there's a response. You know that will happen, and you're not taking any responsibility for it. It's a hustle. It's a self hustle, and you're trying to hustle other people by weaseling your way out of the responsibility for how you interact with other people. Does that make sense? And you really seem to understand that threshold where I've done everything I can within my reason to communicate honestly, and I know that my intentions were to communicate honestly, to not set these erroneous expectations with people and then back out of them, or change the expectation down the road. So I know that my intentions were pure. I know that I'm still learning, and that I'm going to learn from this, and I'll find more elegant ways to navigate as I move forward. So if a person does get offended at that point, now it's a little bit different because I don't know what else I could do. My family members, I have a personal principle that I will only give my attention to people who value it, who want it. Do you want me here? Do you want to talk to me? Do you value my mind? And do you want to have a fair exchange of energy? If the answer is, I'm just inviting you because you're a blood relative, no, that doesn't stack up for me personally. That is at odds with the rest of the world, who puts themselves into vicarious positions or positions that they're uncomfortable because they are a blood relative. I'm sorry. First of all, my blood is my own. The child creates their own blood. So we're not sharing blood. That's number one. We are sharing a little bit of DNA, but I have 50 of that, 50 of that to create a new thing. So I'm not you. I'm not you. Now, my brother, he removed me from Facebook because I said that I loved everybody, and he just doesn't want to talk to me. I'm not going to go out of my way to talk to him. I'm not going to, oh my God, my brother doesn't, I don't care. He has a choice, just like everybody does. Uh, I accept him for the things that we're all this carved block. So I accept his carvedness, but he doesn't accept mine. That's not an even exchange. I don't give him my energy. I'm not going to run up behind him and just be like, "Oh, you're my brother and you have to love me." No, I couldn't care less. And it's the same thing with everybody in my family. If you don't want to value me, if you don't want to, and by support, I don't mean give me money. I don't mean buy my books. I just mean not give me shit. My family gave me a lot of I want to be a writer, and my mom was like, well, you got to get a job, you got to work 40 hours a week, you got to do. It's like you don't even want to listen to me. You don't value me. You don't value my time. You just look at me as your child, therefore you must. No, you don't must anything. Like, you don't owe me a damn thing. My mom owes me nothing. My father, who has passed away, he owed me nothing. I don't owe Kobe anything. He's 22 and out the door. But I have a strong feeling that Kobe and I will continue to stay in communication and maintain a good relationship. But that's a personal principle that I follow that puts me at odds with the rest of the world, because people will look at that and they'll be like, Ernest, that's your brother. And I'm like, yeah, I know. And what's your point? Like, I'm not going to put myself into a situation that makes me feel uncomfortable with people who don't want me there, with people who don't really value me. Why am I going to do that? Just because they're my blood relative, I'm going to try to maintain this relationship that's obviously not valued by the other party? No. But the rest of the world will look at that and they'll be like, Ernest, you're so cold-hearted. Like, you don't go visit your brothers. You don't go visit. No, because they don't really want me there. They just view me as, a blood relative that we're forced to give our attention to. No, you're not. You're not forced to give me your attention at all. In fact, I could live the rest of my life without it and be a-okay because I've dissolved those attachments. Those attachments don't exist for me anymore, those particular ones. But those are examples, and it's a great topic of conversation because at a certain point, we will start to notice that we're putting ourselves on an island. And that island is different from what other people are doing. And if we're continuing to do the practice, that won't be a problem. But if we go away from our practice, then being out on this separate island definitely could become. So if you're attached to adoration from other people, you're gonna come up against that in this practice. That's your battleground, and it is definitely going to show itself in your practice. And then now you have a choice: cherry pick and continue to indulge the adoration of other people, or create personal principles or follow other principles that avoids the entanglements. Does that make sense?
You mean like not go to the engagement party and the bridal shower and
don't
the
have time for that
rehearsal
shit.
dinner and the wedding?
I don't have
and-
time, effort, or energy for
Holy
any of that.
cow!
I'm not into all that.
But
Yeah,
they're my family.
they'll be fine. Yeah. But we do see where these things come from. We see where the attachments come from. We see where the expectations are coming from. And to some extent, I get judged hard by people. Like I really do, because they expect me to be perfect. They expect me to never say anything or do anything or act in a certain way that is anything less than Buddhahood. And I'm like, well, that's weird because I've never proclaimed to be Buddha. So why are we holding me to that expectation? I don't understand. Right. So I have experienced this to the nth degree, and I use my voice of power, which is a part of my practice, to for the logic. If I start to feel the emotion of being at odds with the world and being at odds with other people, and then I go back to my practice, paying attention to learn and paying attention to remember what I learned and learning to navigate more elegantly these situations, such as not committing to things right off the bat, not making these commitments to certain things. And for example, I'm told how you have to run a business. You have to advertise, especially with what I'm doing. You have to put yourself out there. It's all about earnest. I'm sorry, that's just not my lens of perception. I don't want the message to be about earnest. I am a deliverer. I am a mentor at best, but I am not a messiah. Like I'm not a guru figure. I don't want anybody looking at earnest more than they're looking at the message and the practice. Does that make sense? But there may have been a time where I loved that energy. I enjoyed the attention. And that is another example of the reasons why I'll start something and then I'll quit because it didn't give me the vibe that I thought it would, and I'm paying attention, so I need to redirect and learn from it. Like self-advertising. I don't like it. I just don't like it. I look at Instagram and I see everybody taking pictures of themselves. I'm like, cool. I'm not going to do that. Or at least I won't do it as often as they do. I might have one picture or two pictures of myself every now and then, but you look at some people's pages, and this is the way that I avoid judgment of other people. I look at this page and I say, I'm not going to do that. That's a reflection for my behavior, for my actions, because I'm learning and growing all the time. There is no perfection equation
Based on
here.
the way it feels.
Based on the way it feels. Absolutely. And based on the way it feels in practice, if I lose my practice, how it feels is not going to be a reliable gauge, other than now I'm out of my practice and that has a feeling. Jerry, were you going to add something? Sorry.
I was just gonna, I don't know, yeah, I guess add that I think we also all agree this is choice. Donna made the comment a second ago, oh my God, it's my family. If you care about whoever that wedding's for, if you want to do it, you're going to do it. And if it's not that high on your agenda, you're going to make your apologies. You're going to send a wedding gift. I'm sorry, I can't make it. You're going to, but if you want to be there, you'll be there. Same way with Ernest. If he wanted to meet that friend on Thursday, he would do it. So that's why I think going back to what he said, now that I'm rolling with this a minute, that's why we treat people with honesty and respect. You know, I mean, I think it's okay to say, gosh, you know, I don't know, I wouldn't mind getting together for coffee with you sometime, but I don't think that's a discussion I'm going to really want to be involved in. I mean, if that was your choice, you know, but like you said, people do ask you questions and you help them with relationships and you're one-on-ones and, or however you meant that. So yeah, I think, wouldn't we all agree? Really, life is about choice. That's what we're doing here. Deliberate choice. And it's okay. We don't have to judge ourselves. And even though we do, wonder what other people are thinking. That's where the practice, the principle comes back. We catch it. For me to even be feeling that right now, I'm contrasting, I'm comparing, and I'm starting to judge them for how I'm feeling. Outside of physical touch, they're not doing anything to me. If I'm feeling it, need to get away from you, you're talking too much, something's getting triggered with me, bring it back, bring it back. This life is going to be about choice. Is that kind of an agreement?
I mean, I would
Well, it
agree.
feels for me.
I would agree, but I think even the word choice then needs a little bit of clarity because choice implies at the level of recognition or above. Otherwise, it's not an active choice, right? Because if we're below the level of recognition, it is now a pattern, it is now a habit. And so we use these words. If it is a choice, then it is above or at least at the level, the very foundational level of recognition for it to be a choice. So if you're walking down a path and you or let's say that you go to throw something away and you throw it in the right trash can, that is very likely a habit because people are right-handed. I've seen this working in fast food. The right-hand trash can will literally be overflowing, shit falling out of it onto the floor, trays on top of it with food, and the one on the left is half full because they
I
just
was talking about
they
this
just
group,
right.
us.
Yeah.
I was talking about us, and I can damn well tell you it's going to be deliberate on my part.
Right.
If it comes out sideways, I'll be the first to apologize. No doubt in my mind. But
Yes.
my words are deliberate. My choices, they're deliberate. And I was talking about us. I was
Yes.
just wondering if that would be an accurate statement.
To an extent, yeah. I mean, I think, but one of the things that I think is, and this is kind of where I was going towards, is that it's the lens of perception that everything has to go through, even choice. So your decisions, your actions, your words, your beliefs, it's all going through this lens of perception. And so while it is easy to say that this is Donna's choice, it's going through a lens that doesn't make it always feel easy. So yes, in principle, if we're above the level or at the level of recognition, we are choosing. We're making active volition choices. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to feel easy to make those choices because it's going through the lens of perception, the totality of our experience so far. And that's kind of what we come together to talk about, is because it's not always going to feel easy to make some of these choices. And sometimes I think this group understands, but we will probably inevitably interact with people who don't understand why these things are occurring. You know, maybe they read about the law of attraction and they think everything is supposed to be working out for them, or they think that you're just supposed to reject anybody who doesn't bring you joy. And it's like, well, that's kind of selfish. Like, why? I don't want to just put myself on an island with people who agree with me. Like, that would be boring. That doesn't make any sense at all. So, to Jerry's point, yes, if we are practicing and the practice is in place, first of all, you're choosing to do your practice. That's the first choice. And then everything that comes through that lens of perception is closer to an authentic choice. And that does not make it easy. I want to
And
acknowledge
I don't
that
think,
with
yeah,
Donna.
and I don't think it's, yeah, I know I said that earlier. I mean, gosh, this
Mhm.
isn't about, I mean, everything Donna said, I could completely relate to.
Me too.
The
Yeah.
things that you've been sharing, I can completely relate to it.
Yep.
We're all living this human experience and navigating it. And we control nothing but ourselves, you know, so it's, you know, fork and feel and move around and slow things down and try not to react and watch your reaction and, you know, just, yeah, all of
Yep.
it. Yeah.
All of
It's
that.
pretty fun. It's pretty fun.
It is, but it does get tricky. And I think that's what Donna brought to the table today, is that sometimes navigating doesn't always feel easy. It doesn't, especially when it's important to talk about the destroyers because there's a current. There's like a flow, like a momentum with these destroyers. It's not this abstract. The reason I talk about them as a force of nature is because we have created them to the extent that they're a force in our lives, these destroyers. And so it's not always going to be easy when we're navigating our own biology. We're looking at that third piece of cake and it's like and then I could talk about that more, but I guess that's a different subject, because when you see the cake, you have the choice to go below recognition or to stay above recognition, because when you eat that third piece of cake above recognition, it will not feel the same as when you did it below. And eventually the habit will start to lose its momentum because it doesn't feel the way that it used to. You have to maintain awareness and attention through the process, though. Cherry picking is when you meet a choice and you could either go below the level of recognition and go back to the ways that feel most familiar and sometimes feel good, or you could go above recognition and pay attention and maybe still do the act, but now you're doing it with attention, which fundamentally changes it. It's no longer a habitual act. That third piece of cake wasn't a habit if you did it above recognition, and it will feel different. And eventually it won't feel good enough to do. And then you'll be like, no, I don't need that third. I don't even want it. I know how it's going to make me
And my
feel.
question from the beginning was attachments. So
Yes.
when you come home from work and your wife has baked a cake for you and she's excited for you to eat it. I mean, I'm just giving that example.
That's
It's
fair.
probably not a good one between you and Shayna. Or you go to a friend's house that you have made an attachment with and you're happy to see them and they baked a cake and your balance is telling you, I really don't want that cake. And the social construct is that, but they made the cake, everybody wanted a piece of cake and I wouldn't let them touch it because I made the cake for Donna when she gets there. And so am I gonna have that piece of cake now, even though it's not particularly within my balance, or am I going to um uh
You
am
don't
I going
yeah.
yeah, am I going to can I have a piece of cake as deliberate folly? I don't know about that. You know what I mean? When there are attachments, there are it changes the dynamic. And so navigating that becomes trickier. That's all. That was my question from the beginning. And I think
It
we
does
covered
get
it.
tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that having that piece of cake changes when there's other people and expectations involved.
It does. Yeah. And it can get weird sometimes. So again, that's why we have a group study. That's why we can come together and talk about these things, because there are going to be moments where you're just not lining up with what is expected of people. And it's happened to me time and time again, and it will happen to pretty much everybody that does this practice to a certain extent. But how we navigate it is the same. Navigate it above the threshold of recognition. We're going to recognize what's occurring. We're going to maintain our practice, interject the voice of power to help cut through some of the emotion that we're creating, especially with attachments, because there will be emotion involved with attachments. If we're using the word attachment, we have already established something that will cause suffering if the stimuli is removed from us. And telling ourselves that when we feel shitty, it can cut through some of the emotion, because it's like, I know why this is occurring. And to Jerry's point, I've chosen this, and now I just need to adapt and keep learning and keep growing. And there will be, and I avoid predicting, because I don't know how I'm going to deal with how I'm going to navigate the next situation, because this isn't about predicting, it's about adaptation to the stimuli that's presently occurring, what's presenting itself. So I wouldn't say I'll never make a plan again. No, I'm just more present in the moment when I'm about to make that plan. I learn, I feel, and I'm like, okay, I'm just going to be honest with you. I really go by how I feel in the moment. And I will tentatively make this plan with you, but if I don't feel like it, I don't want you to take it personally. And 9 times out of 10, people are like, well, that's a little bit odd, but I get that. Okay,
But
just
they'd
let me
still
know.
take it personally
And they still
because,
may. Yeah,
of
absolutely.
course, you would make a plan with me if you cared about me enough.
Which isn't necessarily accurate. Yeah.
No, it's not, but
Yeah,
that's the social construct.
it is. Yes. And it will get tricky, but it does all still just go back to the same principles. It all goes back to the same practice. Establish connection, emphasize something in your environment, maintain emphasis, and proceed with that lens of perception as opposed to below recognition. And then we'll each individually learn different ways to navigate the island of the practical in a way that feels more authentic to us and in a way that we're not knowingly sending out energy that could potentially cause suffering for other people. Which is, I mean, that's the best we can do. Be your authentic self and don't intentionally try to fuck with people. It's pretty simple. But it won't always feel easy, especially when we're talking about breaking the momentum from the destroyers, which is exactly what Donna is doing. Right now, Donna is tussling with the destroyers. Might not be looking at it this way, may not be visualizing it the way that I did to help me navigate it, because I would visualize the destroyers. Well, okay, I really want to, look at this thing or do this thing or eat this food, and I'm sitting here looking at it, and it's looking at me. I really want that piece of pie. I really want to talk to this person. And you can, if you're in the practice, you kind of feel the momentum, you feel which direction you're going with things, if that makes sense. Especially when you're in the hydrostasy layer of the practice, which it sounds like more and more, Donna, you are navigating those 3 principles in addition to the first 3, because the second 3 rely upon it. Does that make sense?
It does, and the answer is what I thought it would be, as it fleshed out. And that is, I am creating an island that I choose. It's what is here is because I put it here. And there are things that no longer fit because I'm not the same.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, relationship wise, I need to be able to spend time alone. I don't have to be around Shayna all the time. I don't have to need things from her or want things from her, but I'm still learning to be more independent. I'm still navigating certain things that come from the totality of my experience. For example, taking things personally. That's a habit I used to have as a part of social anxiety, is if Donna called me up and said, you know what, I don't want to hang out at 6 p.m. today. I'd say, okay, Donna, hang up the phone and be like, what did I do? Did I make her mad? Did I say something? What did I do? Right? So that's a part of my totality of my experience. That's a challenge that I navigate even to this day, although it's a much less momentum. I can recognize even the little bit of it, but I still navigate that. I still navigate that tendency for my mind to want to take things personally and make it about me when it wasn't. Maybe Donna didn't want to hang out at 6 p.m. because she had a stomach ache. That has nothing to do with me. But I just immediately had the habit of below recognition, taking things personally, making it about me. But now that I'm practicing, I'm giving you an example. So Donna calls, she says at 6 p.m. I don't want to hang out today. My mind starts to go to taking, and then I say, no, wait a second. This is the voice of power, by the way. You don't know why Donna isn't, attending. You don't know this, and Donna gets angry or something like that. Well, I don't know if this is a part of her battle. I don't know if this is a part of her attachments, and I just don't know. So I'm not going to speculate, and I don't need to speculate. And then you see, I've just redirected it. And now the energy isn't going to go that direction. The thought isn't going to go that direction. It's not going to go towards habit. And then before you know it, with this practice, we end up creating relationships that are within our comfort zone of attachment. We end up doing things how we want to do them, saying things how we want to say them. We're more cautious of the things that we do and how we interact with other people because we're aware of the repercussions of the unconscious or the below recognition of the present moment mind. And then before you know it, your relationship dynamics have changed to be more in alignment with what you prefer. How you interact with other human beings socially will change and be more in alignment with what you prefer because you're learning and you're growing and you're communicating. And all of this is a direct result of the practice. Does that make sense?
Yep, it makes sense. I was thinking of my family as in regards of funerals.
Mm-hmm.
There's a serious guilt issue goes on that, you know, and well, especially in Catholic culture, that you go to every funeral, and as you get older, it's almost a social event going to a funeral. But sometimes I really don't want to go there, like a distant relative or a husband of somebody, or you know somebody that you've lost touch with for maybe 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And navigating around that I have found difficult, but I do sometimes get a card and write something out to the family a couple of days after the funeral when the whole thing has died down.
Mm-hmm.
Pardon the pun, died down. And I navigate it my own way if I really don't want to go. But like Jerry said earlier, if it's somebody that you have been connected to and really feel that you want to go, well, then I will put myself out and go, because I could spend my whole days just here and that's enough for me. But, you know, sometimes you have to make that effort and go out into the real world.
Mm-hmm.
My friends say I live in the 15th century, but
Yeah,
that's okay.
that's
I like it here.
Yeah.
But the guilt thing around, I have to navigate that. You know, do I really, am I going for my sisters? Am I going because they sort of say, or Ada doesn't come to anything and, you know, she gets away with it, that sort of thing? Or am I going for the memory of the person or the love of the person?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing.
And you know, when we look at these in terms of the islands, so I talk about 3 islands: the island of self, which is ego; the island of the finite, which is the island of the practical. That's the world we live in. And then we have the infinite essence, the island that you feel more than talk about. So when you get on that island, you just kind of be quiet and pay attention and feel it all. That island, the island of infinity, can't be touched by the destroyers. They can't be touched by the nemesis. They don't live there. They're not on that island at all. So the more the mind is quiet, the more we're connecting with the moment, the more we're feeling the island of infinity where the destroyers can't go. However, the island of self and the island of the practical, the destroyers are vibrant. That's where they live. They're so strong there. And a lot of what we're navigating is we're trying to navigate the islands without the island of infinity. So we're trying to navigate the island of the self using the island of the practical. We're trying to navigate the island of the practical using the island of the self. But what people don't realize is that that island of the self is being conditioned by the destroyers. So you have objects on your island that you know, maybe you don't even really want there. You don't even really like. It's not even really your thing. But maybe because of society, maybe because of biology, maybe because of the habits we've created already, those objects exist on your island. And over time, especially the more we pay attention to the island of infinity, the less those objects have room on your island. They go away. They leave. Does that make sense, that analogy?
Yeah.
And eventually the island of self does, to at least a certain extent, but hopefully if we continue to practice, we learn how to navigate this and we won't quit. But the island of self can at a certain time be closer to the island of infinity than it is the island of the everyday life and practical experience. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you may find yourself on an island of your preference, of your desires, of what you want, of where you want to be and where you want to go and how you want to grow. I live in a world that values things, stuff, money, public adoration, and I don't care about those things. I've even kind of had stuff thrown at me from our own group about not wanting or deciding that money feels out of balance for me too much. You know, too much money doesn't feel balanced. A limousine to me doesn't feel balanced. And I took a little bit of slack for that to a certain extent, but that's my island. You know, that's the island that I have created because I believe that it reflects the island of infinity for me the most. And it's not as influenced by but what does that do? It puts me at odds with the common mind because you do need money, you do need public adoration, you do need, this is what the island of the practical is telling you, because they're conditioning you from the moment you're born to chase these things. You know, from the time that you're a young person, they're trying to tell you what success is, what you need to go to college, you need to do this, you need to do that, you have to do this to be a successful person, to be a happy person, to be a complete person. And it's all coming and is being conditioned by the destroyers themselves. Do you see what I mean? So basically what I'm saying is that eventually the island of self becomes more unique to you. It becomes more of an authenticity thing than a derivative of the destroyers. And it will put you at odds with everybody else's island, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And also, I've noticed with some of those girls that I swim with, women, I should say, really, they're not girls anymore, but maybe they are inside. I think they all are. But anyway, we some of them have splintered off into groups and are doing other things as well as the swimming, which is still a strong thing. But they're going off hiking up the mountains, and that's a mountain range here. And I used to feel sort of a wee bit maybe not capable of going up the mountains, but wanting to. But then when I examined it, I thought to myself, do I really want to be going up the mountains?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was no. The answer, the thing that I wanted was the bonding with friends and doing a shared, whatever experience it was. It was the shared experience and not the actual mountain or that fear of being excluded, I suppose, from a group.
Mm-hmm.
And now there are ones who go cycling, ones who go up the mountains. There's different ones who go to music events, and I'm in some of those, but not all of them. But I had to sort of settle that with myself when the feeling come up of being excluded.
Mm-hmm.
I had to say to myself, do I want to go up the mountain when I'm not trained for it? And the answer was no, I really don't. So that feeling of authenticity, that you spoke of there, is what I'm feeling is in being honest about my own capabilities and about what I want out of these groups and things, you know.
Mm-hmm. One thing that helps me, Ida, is to make it less like fatalistic or to make it less out of the moment. So I can say that in this moment, at least, I don't want to go up the mountain. Nothing against mountains, nothing against climbing. You know, maybe someday down the road, I'm gonna want to. I don't know. But I do know how I feel right now. And for whatever reason, maybe it is a little bit of habit, maybe it is a little bit of conditioning, maybe it is a little bit of attachment, maybe it is a little bit of fear. Bottom line is I don't want to in this moment right now. So I'm going to listen to that. I'm going to follow that and I'm going to learn from that. Does that make sense? So removing the psychological time from our evaluation process, removing the expectations or the scenarios and things that come along with it sometimes. Does that make sense? So sometimes when we say, I don't want to go up the mountain, we start to look for these deep reasons. Or we try to, we'll never go up a mountain, or mountains aren't in my alignment, or whatever we want to say. Yeah.
The pictures that they take, and you see that's the whole inspiring thing. The views from up there are just amazing. And I sort of have settled myself with, I go out walking as much as I can, and I'll do it in my own way, what I can do. And maybe someday I'll walk 16 mile up a mountain. But, you know, at the minute, this is what I'm doing. And
Exactly.
this is what suits me for my life. So that's how and then I've been talking to my husband about it sometimes, and he would say, all those girls love you. They really do. So, you know, it's not that they're excluding you. They want you in different things. You know, he's my reassurer, if there's such a word. But you know, so then I settle myself with that and say, no, this is just, it's either fear or ego,
Right.
or one of those two usually.
And the categorizing isn't even necessary. You know, you don't have to compartmentalize or even categorize. You could just connect, emphasize, maintain emphasis. How do you feel right now? Just go with that. That's it. Just go with the feeling. Eventually, the feeling becomes enough to navigate. I don't have to say anything else. So, for example, well, people stopped inviting me because I don't commit, you know, so they don't know if Ernest is coming to the party. So they don't know if they should get chips and dip for Ernest because they don't know if he's going to come because he doesn't commit. Eventually, they stopped inviting me. That's fine. I don't take that personally in this moment. They're not inviting me. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. I don't need future. I don't need to understand. I don't need to figure it out. So do you see how sometimes even with how we're interacting, the traps of attention, the traps of thinking can start to come in, and it's like, oh, now I need to evaluate, you know, should I or shouldn't I? Or if we just go back to the practice, if we go back to emphasizing and maintaining emphasis, and then kind of, well, how do I feel in this moment of presence? I don't have to understand it. I don't have to make connections, and I don't have to have epiphanies, and like you said, it's just I'm present now. I don't feel like doing it right now. I'm going to maintain my practice and keep learning. Does that make sense? Because sometimes we can find out that the reason we're not doing something is because of a habit. Maybe we do have the habit of backing out. And then every time we go and we do something, we find out that we really do enjoy it. That's a different type of dynamic because we're all different people. But the recipe will always be the same. Ernest won't tell you what to do. Donna won't tell you what to do. You know, we're not going to tell each other what to do. We'll just say, okay, well, let's go back to the practice. Let's see what the principles, how do things feel when we're present, mindful, and deliberately intending the point of our attention? How do we feel when we've interjected a little bit of logic? I don't have to understand how I feel. I feel how I feel. This is it right now, and this is what I have to navigate with. So I'm just going to use what I have right now, continue to pay attention, continue to learn, and understanding about these situations and scenarios will come to me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right, because that's your balance at that moment.
Yes. And your balance is always changing. Yep.
Right, if I feel uncomfortable, if I feel that pull, I feel it's not in my balance. I'm using force to do this thing, or to accept this invitation, or to go to this place, or to climb the mountain, or whatever. It feels like force to me, and so I'm not going to do it. It doesn't fit in my balance. It doesn't mean that your current balance is the forever balance.
Right.
Like Ida said, someday I may want to do that. I may be at a point where 16 miles up a mountain seems like within my scope and within my balance and desirable, but it doesn't right now. And only you can decide what that is. Yeah.
Exactly. But I guess I am pointing out, though, that sometimes, typically when we're navigating a challenge is when the traps of thinking will introduce themselves. So if we're navigating a challenge of do we want to walk 16 miles or don't we, the error would be to compare, to contrast, try to figure out why you feel this way, to maybe put it in this, you know, contextual reference that's outside of the present moment. Maybe we get fatalistic and we're never going to have friends that are, you know, common mind or whatever. You know, that's all a trap of thinking. It's now we're driving our behavior with our cognition, with our thought, with our beliefs, as opposed to our presence, our mindfulness, and the deliberate attention enough to just focus on the feeling and the direction of inspiration or away from inspiration. Does that make sense, Ida?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, when we're navigating challenges, when is the main time that some of these traps of thinking will try to nudge themselves in. You know, maybe Donna right now just doesn't feel like hanging out with a certain person. It just, you know, I'm just not feeling it. I don't know why. I've had people ask me, well, why don't you want to go? And I'm like, fuck, I don't know. I'll let you know when I find out. But right now, I just don't want to. You know, it is what it is. And
And you don't have to figure it out.
because it could still be a habit too. It could be a habit that I'm working out
Absolutely.
myself.
That
Yeah.
it could be something that you want to change,
Yes.
that you want to operate differently in that circumstance. And but if that's not clear to you right now, you've just by being aware that you are choosing this in maintaining your balance, that perhaps it's not an advantageous way to go forward all of the time. You've planted the seed of awareness in that aspect, and then you'll start noticing, if you keep practicing and you're not trying to figure anything out, you'll start noticing patterns of, you know
Yes.
what, I do tend to avoid these type of circumstance, and
Exactly.
I can see now that it's because I'm worried about judgment, or because
Exactly.
it reminds me of blah 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 or whatever, and I don't want that to be part of the way I navigate any longer.
Hmm. Ultimately, you'll see the fear involved. I love traditional Chinese medicine. It has all these different emotions associated to all these different organs. Every single one of those emotions are a derivative of fear. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're the last ones here, so we'll go ahead and get out of here. I have to use the bathroom. So I will see you again soon. Donna, let's set up a time for one-on-ones to start the teaching process to get everything
Okay.
ready for that.
Yep.
And then we'll have like a little bit of a business meeting about it too, because I have Bob on board. So Bob is going to teach with the school. And so hopefully the school will have 3 instructors when we first start, myself, you, and Bob. And then if you just want to do book study type of stuff where you just lead the book study, that's a great way to start. We're not doing one-on-ones. It's class-based in the beginning. So eventually Bob will, and remember, the different ways of presenting. Bob will probably want to start with a webinar, you know, where he just does a webinar once a month or once every other month to get his feet wet. You can do the exact same thing. You could do a book study, or you could do a webinar, or you could do whatever you want, whenever you want. I'm probably going to offer 2 or 3 classes a week.
Okay. I like a class. I like something shorter.
Hmm.
But I really, since I mentioned it, it's still there.
Hmm.
I really like the idea for my own clarity, and then I think it will be useful in the future of a textbook. But the textbook is really just going to be about a clarification of terms. And
I
I
would
know
love
that
that.
you can do it like speaking in a second, but where I just think I like it on paper. It helps
Okay.
it helps me think.
So what we could do is we could do one-on-ones, highly topical, and then I'll record the one-on-one so that you can put that into writing, and we can create a textbook,
Okay.
right? Because we can have each one as a topic. What is presence? What is mindfulness? What is deliberate attention? What are the 3 pillars? You know, what are the 3 techniques? And then as we talk about this, you can write it down.
Okay.
I only have so much energy to write, is why I mentioned that.
Oh,
So
I don't want you to write
yeah.
it. I just you have organized it in a way that I would like to be in print, the organization of it.
Oh, I have the organization of it in print already.
All right.
Yeah, so I'll send a little bit of
Maybe
that
it
to
would
you.
help to see that, and
Sure.
then I can ask the questions. Where do the destroyers fit in? Where
Okay.
does the blah 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 fit in? And then let's define those so that we're agreeing on terminology and
Okay.
semantics.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll plan that. I have to use the bathroom though, so I'll
Okay,
see you.
great.
Okay. Bye.